Hi, I'm Associate Professor Alex Russell. Please call me Alex. And I'm coming to you from northern Wollongong in New South Wales, the land of the Darawal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging there. I'm talking to you about Qualtrics, and what I want to try and get across to you today is some of the cool things that we've been doing and some things that could be done to get you to think about it, to open your mind a little bit about what you can use surveys for. So we're going to show you some cool examples and talk you through some of the tools that are available. And we're not even scratching the surface. It's a really full-featured platform. So about me, why am I talking to you about this? I've been using Qualtrics for about 10 years. I completed expert certification because I was bored one night and you could do that. So I did that with a glass of wine in hand. But more than that, I've created training tools around Qualtrics for people who are getting used to it or who are new into it, which a lot of people have used and found really useful. So I'll point those out as we go. And I'm also one of our brand ambassadors at CQU, which basically means I'm an admin. So I have access to a few extra rights and can help you with some things if you run into trouble on Qualtrics there too. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to introduce Qualtrics, like a little bit of what it is, and talk about how it differs from some other survey platforms. I'll try and open your mind a bit, expand your thinking about what surveys are and what they can be, and what else you could use Qualtrics for even beyond surveys. Like you can use it for just about anything, really. We'll talk a little bit about doing data analysis and visualization and even some reporting from within Qualtrics, because there's some cool tools there. There's some issues with them as well, and we'll talk through that too. And then I'll show you where, like how you can get access to Qualtrics with your CQU account, where you can access training, and where you can go if you need some help too. So these are the topics I want to cover. If any questions pop up, please feel free to ask them as we go. Sometimes I'll miss it in the chat, so feel free to jump off mute. Or, we'll work it out. You can ask questions at the end too. You're probably going to hear my kids in the background too, because it's New South Wales and it's after school. So what is Qualtrics? Qualtrics is, most people think of it as a survey platform. It's a hell of a lot more than that. And I want to contrast it to the kind of surveys that you typically see. They're incredibly boring surveys. These types of, have you done this, yes or no? Or can you answer some words in this text box? This is what most people think of with surveys. And these types of surveys are really commonly run on tools like Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, Lime Survey, and you can run those types of surveys on Qualtrics too. And if that's what you want to do, great. But let me show you some ways that it can be used. I'm going to talk about like some academic uses and then more sort of market research kind of uses, because it's used for both, because different audiences will have different needs here. So I use it more in the academic sense, mostly for data collection. And we do some pretty fancy stuff in it as well, beyond just questions and answers. I'll show you some stuff, and you're not going to believe that I actually do it for a living when you see some of the things I do. Like we play video games in surveys. I swear it's for science. But we often do our own analyses, right? So we'll download the data and analyze it in things like R or SPSS, usually because we want to do stuff that's a little more than what Qualtrics can do. But it can also be used, and it's typically used for market research purposes, where you're doing data collection and you might want to have some customer interaction as well, a little bit of back and forth, send out a survey, tell us, how did we do today? And they might give you an answer, and you might want the survey to tell you, hey, this person needs a response. It can do all of that kind of thing for you. It can do automated analysis and reporting, and you can even make the reporting available to stakeholders like, I don't know, an external client or a CEO and things. So there's a lot of that in there too. So the next slides are dot points, and they look like terrible slides, but I promise my slides are going to get better after this. So some examples of what you can do with Qualtrics, so things like beyond just question and answer surveys, things like an event registration survey. Go here, tell us if you want to come to our event, fill in your details, and you can get sent an email when someone does that. You can link them into a payment service if they're signing up for a conference, for example. Great example of what you can do in Qualtrics. A/B testing, showing people two different versions of a product and working out what they like and why, is a very common use. something like a raffle where you're not actually collecting data from them, but you're using like randomized functions in Qualtrics there as well. You can do that. You could use it not even for data collection. You can use it as a mailing tool. So if you've got a list of email addresses or you want to collect people's email addresses in a survey and then use that to contact people, you can use that. That's fantastic for that. We could use it for ticketing. TASAC could use it. They're not going to, but they could, if they wanted to, use it for ticketing and including closing the loop and things like that. So if you've got a use for that with some of your clients, then that's an option. Pulse checks. What else? It's really customizable as well. So you can really change, like, surveys can be exactly what you want them to be. You can have different versions of surveys for different people, or you can show different people certain, different versions of questions as well, depending on what's relevant to them. You can screen people out. You can have some questions early on that determine if they're the people you want to be hearing from. And if not, don't ask them the rest of the questions. Don't waste their time. There are lots and lots of question types too. So there are those, fill in the blank questions and like select the radio button questions and type in the box questions. But you can use it for uploading files. People can upload files for you. You can show people a picture and get them to click on the screen and say, what's grabbing your attention, and get a heat map from it. You've got reCAPTCHA questions for detecting bots, all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, it's pretty cool. It's kind of fun when you play with those two because it breaks up a survey for people. There's lots of built-in data collected too. So it'll collect like IP addresses and where they are, and you can use that to make sure you're getting people that you want. Talked a little bit about data quality there too. And also detecting bots, which is becoming a big problem, particularly for research surveys. We can carry data across multiple waves as well. So we can do longitudinal studies and refer back to what people said in previous surveys. And look, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. I'm just reading the list now. Let's get into more fun stuff. So let's expand your thinking about surveys. I'm going to show you some cool things that we've done. I had an honours student, Chris Byrne, a few years ago, and he was really interested in pokies. So if you know what pokies are, unless you're from WA in Australia, they're pretty much everywhere. They look like this, and they used to look like this. They're getting more fancy these days, but this is the idea. And typically there's very little information on the screen. How many credits you've got, what you're about to bet, and what you just won. And people find it really hard to keep track of play because that's all the information you've got. And all your winnings are reinvested too. So we thought, what about if we give them a bit more information? What happens to their play? And to do that, we programmed a pokey. And we showed it to them in Qualtrics. So we use JavaScript programming here. That's one thing that Qualtrics supports. You can use all sorts of other stuff, HTML, CSS. You can even link to external websites and display those in a survey too. We've done all that. And we didn't design our own pokey here. There was a guy who designed it, and we just downloaded that and tweaked it a little bit. So we had two versions of our pokey. And so some people saw one version and some people saw the other. One version looked like this with credit, bet, and win, the same as a normal pokey. And the other one had a whole bunch more information, how long they'd been playing and how many spins and how much they'd lost and all this. And we found, I'm going to show you crappy academic visualization in a second. We found that the big black bar here, or the darker gray bar here, these are the people who were showing the normal pokey interface, and they kept playing beyond like what they'd already put in. So if you put in 20 bucks and you had some winnings, these people just kept gambling until they had $0 left. But if people had more information, they had about a 50-50 chance of stopping before they spent all of their money, which is great because that's a big problem with pokies. People spend everything. Now, this is an honours student who did this, right? No budget, did it all themselves, and got published in a really high-tier journal in gambling research, which is great. Now, you might not have use for doing pokies. You could just muck around with it. But there's plenty of other JavaScript tools ready to go that you can incorporate into your Qualtrics surveys if you would like to. All sorts of things. Just Google whatever you want and JavaScript. And if you don't know how to incorporate it, this is where AI can come in. Here's GPT giving me the steps on how to incorporate it as well. So you don't have to be like a programming superstar here. There's a lot of, some of it can help if you've got someone who knows a bit about programming, but we can do some cool stuff like this with very little effort, which is great. You wouldn't be able to do it on any other survey platform. Surveys can also be personalized. So here's an example from a survey that I did a while ago, where early in the survey, we asked people to give us the names of the 20 most influential people in their lives. And later on, we say, all right, we want to know how well people know people, right? How well this person knows this other person. And we can do that using whatever names they've answered earlier in the survey. So these questions will look different for every person, depending on what they put in this first thing here. Making surveys personalized and customized to the person really keeps people engaged. So if you're able to do that, that's a very helpful thing to do. And Qualtrics has all the tools to do it. It's super easy. It's called pipe text. And it takes very little programming knowledge. Like, you don't have to do any coding. It's all in drop-down menus. Here's another example where you might use something like that. Early in the term, let's say you're teaching, you could ask people, what are your expectations for the term? And then later on, you can send them another survey and said, hey, in that first survey, right at the start of the term, you said this is what you're expecting in this unit. How about now? And so you can show them the answer that they gave earlier, all from within the survey. You don't have to, send out custom emails or anything like that. Works quite well. Here's another example. We created a video game. We were bored. No, this is actually, we were funded to do this, and we got to play like a Space Invaders-y type game, and people were shooting rocks and asteroids and other ships and everything. And I swear it told us something about gambling, but it's very hard to explain, so it looks like we were just mucking around, which we kind of were too. Professor Matthew Rockloff did that one. It was a great, fun experiment. Here's another one. We wanted people to bet. So we got people to see these betting options. In this one, they were betting on AFL, and they could bet on either by a team to win by 1 point, or a team to win by 25 points, which is harder to happen, or 43 points. Like, it's not that often there are blowouts in AFL games beyond that. And if they, did their bet by 43 points or more, chose the right team, they'd get a payout of $26. And they're actually keeping their winnings here too. So people really liked this one because they could make lots of money from us. And so we got people to bet, and we had all of this randomized as well. And, which of these inducements, these blue things at the top, those ads that you see, like the promotions you see with gambling ads, which ones were associated with which games. All of this was randomized, and we didn't have to program a bunch of different permutations of things. We just used the randomizer function in Qualtrics, which makes you able to use experiments. It was really cool. We wanted to make this engaging, so we got people to place their bet and then pretend like they were watching a newsreel of the game. So we couldn't use actual AFL footage because of copyright reasons. So I played my Xbox for a week, again for science, and recorded it, and we cut it up into newsreels, right? And people loved this. Not only were they betting for money here, they got to watch the game with my brother doing the voiceover too, which was quite cool. And we got solid results out of this, like really good results, which has been described as like, the set of studies provide some of the most convincing evidence yet on gambling advertising's negative effects on gambling behavior. Now, that worked really well for the guy who wrote that because he came and worked for us for 2 years, but that got him on our radar. But the point is, all of these surveys that I'm talking about here are incredibly different to that idea of that first survey that I showed you. Has this happened? Yes or no? Type words in the box. And this is all stuff that we can do. So here's some more cool ideas for how you could possibly use Qualtrics. And these are just ideas. I'm just trying to get you thinking about it. And you can take away from this what you might be able to use it for. So, one thing is anytime you want to capture information, and it doesn't have to be from research participants. I talked about a conference registration before, or abstract submission or something, and you can set it up so that it emails you whenever anyone takes that, so you can see those submissions rolling in, which is always nice. You can even email the person who took the survey and gave their abstract or whatever, so that they can see it's been submitted. People like that. And from that as well, you can create a list of attendees and use that to communicate with them about the conference going forward. Another example is entering data in the lab or in the field, where you might not want to get your laptop out, you might not want to get the keyboard full of all sorts of crap. So you can set up like an online touchscreen kind of survey, have an iPad there, and enter data that way. Might make it easy for you, particularly if you're doing the same data entry over and over again. What about if you're in the field and you don't have access to the internet? What can you do? Well, Qualtrics has an offline survey app. which you can download on iOS and Android, and you can upload your survey into this and use that out in the field. So let's say you're in a remote community and you can't access the internet, you can still capture data in the Qualtrics platform, bring it back home, sync it, and it will all be there waiting for you when you're ready. This one is an add-on to our license. I don't believe we have this at the moment, but if this is something that people need, talk to us. Pavle won't like that because he's going to have to spend more money, but we'll see how we go. Here's an example of how it's actually being used at the moment. So I heard Peter talking earlier about the data labels that we have brought in. So things like, what are they, public, and the other ones, whatever the normal one is that I use, and then the other ones that I don't use. So if you've got to decide which label you need to use, we put together a tool here where you can go, these are the uses, this is the relevant information, and here is the label that you should use based on your answers. Now, we're not actually collecting data. We don't really actually care what people's answers are. The purpose is to give them the information at the end saying, you know, this is the label that you should use. So it's not so much about data collection, it's using the data that people are giving you to give them information. So that's a really nice example of how it can be used. And this is, I think, something that a lot of people would like to get out there a little bit more. Could be a really useful tool for students, for example. Anything where you want people to follow a process as well. You know, have you done this thing now? No? Okay, here's how you do it. All right, you've done that now, cool. Here's the next thing that you need to do. So you can walk people through a process. It's not necessarily about capturing data from them. It's about, you know, helping people through something. This is, again, a really useful one for students, potentially. Revision quizzes. Moodle's pretty good for a lot of revision quiz uses, and it obviously ties into our gradebook and things like that there. But if you, for actual assessments and stuff, but you can set up some pretty flexible revision quizzes, you know, via Qualtrics too, particularly if you want to make it available to people outside of the university, or if you're not using it as part of teaching, because we're not really meant to use Moodle as part of like research. So, you know, this could be something that we could do. And one more that a lot of people don't realize is that surveys don't have to be linear. And by that, I mean going, all right, here's question 1, answer that one, now here's question 2, answer that one, now here's question 3, and so on. What you can do, Qualtrics has a thing called the table of contents function, where you can say, all right, chapter 1 is this part of the survey, and you can take them to, you know, initial questions about themselves, and then back to the table of contents. Chapter 2 is about your behaviors, and people can then fill them in whatever order they like. And if you're using it for something other than collecting data, they can go and see whatever they like. So this can be a way of delivering chapters of knowledge, if you like. That's really useful and something I'm using a lot more these days. People kind of like having control over what they do when. So all of this so far has been about trying to open your mind and get you thinking about surveys in a bit of a different way. It's up to you now to work out what you might use it for. What I'm going to talk about now is about analysis. I can see there's a couple of questions in the chat. I might, but I don't know what they are because the chat's not in front of me. But if there's anything urgent, maybe one of the other team can let me know. But otherwise, I'm going to move on to analysis, if that's all right. Sorry, it's you know, when you're sharing and the Zoom chat doesn't work. All right, so analysis. Qualtrics does have the ability to analyze different types of data. It's okay. Depends on what you need. So we can think about data basically in 2 different ways, you know, numbers, quantitative stuff, and words, qualitative stuff, and somewhere in the middle there's profit for us. With words, like people giving, you know, sentiments about things, or people typing into open-ended questions, we can always download the data. We can use tools like Thematic, or we can use NVivo or whatever. Qualtrics maybe isn't always the greatest place for really in-depth qualitative stuff, because one of the key advantages of qualitative research is having that conversation, that back and forth with people and probing their answers a little bit. So Qualtrics doesn't really do that, but you can still capture a lot of text data and you can analyze it. And they do have a thing called Text IQ for this, which I'll show you in a sec. And if you're doing things with numbers, so quantitative stuff, you do what I do and download the data and use external tools like SPSS or R or whatever you like to analyze it. or you can use Stats IQ, which is their Statsy-based thing, and I'll show you that too. So here is Text IQ, an example of it. It's typically good for sentiment analysis. How do people feel about a product? So, you can see here, these are some sentences or like paragraphs that people have entered. Green ones, pretty positive. Gray one's a bit neutral. The red one, not so positive. It's not really good at things like sarcasm. So if people are being sarcastic and going, yeah, I really loved how that program cut out in 3 seconds, it's going to count it as positive. So, it still needs that like human intervention there a bit, but it's at least a very good start. And it can come out with cool visualizations like some of these plots over here, word clouds. Everyone loves a word cloud, so you can do that sort of thing too. So it's there, and if you want to, you can drill down further using things like, this response, does it require me to get back to people? Really useful if you're using it as like a mailing list kind of tool, or if you're dealing with like clients or students rather than research participants, is really handy for that kind of thing. And there's a few other enrichments there as well. So if this is your thing, by all means explore it. I don't think like if you're a true qualitative researcher and you really appreciate that back and forth with participants and the real in-depth kind of detailed data that you get out of it, you can still actually upload data into TextIQ and let it do its thing, and use that as a starting point, but it probably won't do everything that you want it to do. This is Stats IQ, so this is what it can do with numbers. So there's a simple data visualization here for describing individual kind of variables. It's really handy for just like a quick snapshot of what's going on. And you can look at associations between variables here as well. So, cross-tabulating variables or looking at correlations or those sorts of things. It can run some regressions and stuff like that too. It's not bad, and it's getting better. For those who do, like the kind of stuff that I do, like really, more sophisticated models, shall I say, like more variables in there and you need a lot more sway over what's going on, it's a bit limited for that kind of thing. But for really simple reporting where you want to get a snapshot of, say, how your students are doing, and what kind of responses they're giving you, this is pretty handy. It's not bad at all. It's nice to have it right there, ready to go. With both of these things, though, we talked a little bit about QA processes before there, or data cleaning or data quality, and it's really important to clean your data. So, go through and look for things like typos, because TextIQ is not great with typos or sarcasm. And Stats IQ, a lot of the time you'll have people who take a survey where their responses aren't actually genuine, particularly if we're incentivizing people to take part in a survey. So you do need to clean some stuff out there, or clean out outliers. Something where someone said they're 3,000 years old or whatever, you'll need to clean all that up, because otherwise your analyses won't be great. So don't assume it can do all that for you. You need to understand that, if you're putting not great data in, you're not going to get great data out. So check it before it goes in. Now, what about if you want to communicate those results too? All of that, the Text IQ and the Stats IQ stuff is visible to you, the survey users, but there are ways to communicate them to other people. There are two. One is called results, which is this thing, where you can, define which of those things are shown to people. And you can, this is useful for that quick overview. And it's more for like internal purposes. I wouldn't show this to like an external client, for example. If you do want to show things to external clients, you can do things that are pretty highly formatted, and look quite cool. And this is called reports. So with these, you can, set them all up and export them as like a PDF or a Word document. Or you can just make a link visible to people, and you can share that with external clients, and they can watch how these numbers change as the data update as well. So there's some pretty cool stuff built in there, but you sort of have to determine if that's what you need or not, because it's up to you. If you have collected data elsewhere, you can upload it. It's a bit tricky but it's doable. So I'm going to say that that's there, but it may not always, and then use Text IQ and Stats IQ, but it may not be worth the effort, but it's possible, particularly if you just want a word cloud. That kind of thing's nice. All right, so where can I learn more about Qualtrics? First thing for you to do is to go and get an account. And the way that you do this, everyone at CQU, staff, students, including undergrad students, have access to Qualtrics. You go to qualtrics.cqu.edu.au and you sign in using your usual CQU credentials. So that normal login page will pop up. And you can use your staff credentials. Students can use their student credentials. That's fine. And the first time you log in, it will set up an account for you. Some people go to qualtrics.com and try and sign up for a trial account with their CQU email address and think it's going to, that's going to link it to our account. It doesn't work like that. So you go here, and then anytime in the future you want to log into Qualtrics, you also go to this address. So this is just the way that you access it all the time. So bookmark it. It's free for us to use. Previously, we were using SurveyMonkey, which had limits around how many surveys could be active at one time and how many users we had, and sometimes how many responses you could collect. There are absolutely no limits on Qualtrics. So all of us can have an account, and all of us could have loads of surveys running at any one time, and that's fine. Once you've signed in, you look at this screen and you're like, I don't know what to do. And there is a lot of help around, and I'm going to show you how that works. But a lot of the help kind of assumes you know what you want to do. Here's a thing called pipe text. Here's how you use it. But you have to know you want to use pipe text to go and look for it, right? So this is what I did. I created these how-to videos that kind of talk you through from go to woe, like, setting up your account, how you just start with questions. What are some different types of questions? How you define survey flow, who goes where, when, how you download data, all those things. Like I've got all of that built into some videos. These were recorded a few years ago and the interface has changed a bit, which is really annoying because recording these videos takes a very long time. So I am looking to update these with website web pages and screenshots instead, because they're a lot easier to update. This is on my to-do list and it's happening in the next year. The videos still work though. The lessons in the videos work, and the points that are being made are all the same. You just have to understand that the interface is a bit different and know where to look where. There's more coming too. If you have any specific questions that you'd like me to do a video on, please reach out because I am adding more as we go. There's also some training here from Qualtrics themselves, a thing called Basecamp. And these are free for you to access too. There are different certification journeys that you can use. Journeys is such a business term, isn't it? It's different certification journeys that you can do. One is like learning the basics, and then one is learning like more experty kind of stuff. We want to use Core XM. There are other versions of it like Employee XM for like HR professionals, or Customer XM if we're dealing with customers. Core XM is kind of the generic product, and that's probably what we want to know. So you can do these, and if you want to get that certification at the end of it, like an actual certificate saying that you're an expert, you can. It costs about $500 US. You don't need to do it. You can still access the training and just not take the final exam. That's absolutely fine. So here's what an example of, one of their modules looks like. This module takes about 39 minutes and it's split up into doable chunks, like a minute here, 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here, and you can work through them in your own time, do a bit at a time as you want. So there's lots of training around, but you can have all the training you like and you're still going to run into some issues. So where can you get help? A lot of people reach out to me, and I can't help everyone with their surveys because all of you are doing so many surveys, and I just can't provide one-on-one support for everyone. And it's partly because I also have to cost my time. I'm on contract. So if you've got money to pay for my contract, let's talk. Otherwise, I'm going to send you to other places. And in particular, I'm going to send you to Qualtrics for support because they're fantastic and they're free. They're covered as part of our license. Once they know that you're on our CQU license, you don't have to pay anything. If for some reason people feel a bit weird about going to Qualtrics support, but you shouldn't because they're very, very good. So all you would do is just Google Qualtrics support, and you can try searching for something, but that kind of assumes you know what you want to search for. Or you can, there's a contact box here somewhere usually as well that you can, here we go, it's behind my little Zoom thing, contact support there. So you can use that and contact them, and they get back to you really quickly, like usually within a day, usually within a few hours. And more than that, you can give them access to log into your account and they can actually go and have a look at the survey and the thing you're trying to do and help you with it. All right. As long as you give them, they'll talk you through how to give them that access. It's not hard. So they're fantastic for support and I would highly recommend doing it. And if you're asking a really difficult question, they'll escalate it to someone who knows better. There is also a community of users called the Qualtrics XM community, which is where a lot of people ask questions and other people sort of chime in to answer. Now, not all questions get answers, but this is a great place to go. So I would recommend that too. A couple of additional things to consider. Data security, the data are stored on Australian servers, which is pretty important, particularly for any Queensland education, I think, things that we're doing. You can and should share the surveys with other people so that they can, help you with programming or test it. And you can even share with people like external collaborators, like people at other unis, for example. That's doable. And there are ways to automate and integrate with other tools like SPSS and Salesforce and Tableau and all those kind of things, which we don't do a lot of, but it's there and we could do more of that. There is an issue around bots as well. If you are running a survey and making it available to people outside of the uni, for example, with a prize draw or a cash incentive, take my survey for $10 or a $10 gift card, you will get smashed with people who have written scripts to take surveys automatically in the hope that they're going to rip you off. It's becoming a real problem. So I put together a template here, which is available on my website, to help you with this. At the very least, this page talks through how it all works and what the protections are and how you can use them. So if you're doing external surveys, this is a big problem and I would recommend it. All right, so I want you to take a sec to reflect on your newly opened minds around surveys, hopefully, and take these takeaways from it. So Qualtrics is available to everyone at CQU, staff and students, even undergrad students. And you just go to qualtrics.cqu.edu.au to open your account and to sign in into the future. It's super flexible and you can do all sorts of stuff with it. You just need to know what you want to do. That's more the challenge. You can analyze and report data, including data you captured elsewhere. Just be aware that, it's pretty good for a lot of stuff, but depending on what you need, it might not cover everything. And there's a huge community of support around, including the XM community and Qualtrics support there too. So I'm going to stop here to take questions because it's about that time, I think. I wasn't watching the clock. I think it's about that time. And let's have a look what's in the chat. Where did the one start for me? Peter came in with the labels: public, official, sensitive, and protected. So I usually use official for most stuff. The sensitive data tools are also use a lot of pipe text and conditional logic as well. That's from Amanda Flanders, who made that, by the way. So I think I said we, but it was all Amanda. I'm sorry. So Amanda made that, and Qualtrics was really fantastic to make that tool in. So that's there. And there's just my link. So, okay, there was no questions. There was just people commenting along as I was talking. So does anyone have any questions that they would like to run through? Do you think Qualtrics could be used to capture data like counts on the number of desks/chairs in our teaching spaces? Could we create a survey for campuses to use and end up in Excel? Absolutely. Yeah. So sure, you can do all sorts of things like that. You just set up a little thing, enter the room number, enter number of chairs, enter number of desks. Cool. Go to enter the things, go to the next room, enter the things. So yeah, you can use it for anything, even, things like that. Like you could put it like straight into an Excel sheet if you want. But Excel's fiddly and you always end up in the wrong cell anyway. So instead you can use it more easily there. Yeah, there's lots of ways you can use it. we use Qualtrics with our team. Is there a way to have a project folder where every survey added allows all our collaborators to access? There are things in Qualtrics which we haven't really brought in yet because they're a bit of a manual thing, but it's been on my radar of things to do, and I've been ridiculously busy. We can set up labs. So research groups, for example, and you can also share, which means that you can, set up shared resources like that. That can include things like not just the surveys themselves, but if you've got questions that you use over and over again too, like, how many different ways do we ask gender, right? We ask it pretty much the same way most of the time. Same for age, all of the questions that are in all of our surveys, you can write them once and save them into a library too. And we can have a uni-wide library where everyone has access to everything. We can have a lab library. We just need to actually set you up in labs. Don't start emailing me about that. We'll look at doing that soon. Or we can, set up libraries and share them with individual users there too. So there's a bunch of ways to share that kind of information. Yes. So I would like to look at bringing labs in, but we will need to work out a process for how that's going to work. Do we use workflows? Do I use workflows? Karen uses simple workflows to provide notifications when responses are received based upon certain fields. Right. So a workflow is a thing that you can use where when an event happens, you can trigger things. So an example would be when a person completes a survey, 2 weeks later, I want to send them the next survey. And I don't want to send this survey out to everyone at this point and then this survey out to everyone 2 weeks later. I want them to be on their own schedule. That's what you would use a workflow for. So yeah, we use that all the time. It's also really good for thank you emails. People really like that. If you've got their email address, you can send them a thank you email at the end of the survey. Thanks for taking part in the survey. Here are the next steps. This is where you're going to find out information when it's available. Or if you have any questions, this is who you can contact. We often, surveys often have a really abrupt kind of end to them where you answer the last question. It goes, thanks, close the browser now. You can make it a bit more personal, a bit more interactive. People kind of like that. So workflows are really good for that kind of thing. But there's so many different things you can do in workflows, and it can be specific too. You can say, I want to send this email to people who answered this question in this way. And I want to send this, if people said, I love the unit, or I gave the unit a satisfaction score of 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever out of 10, then I want to send them the, hey, that's awesome. Please keep any feedback coming. Whereas if they said, I gave the unit a satisfaction score of 1 to 3 or something, you could send them an email saying, oh, no, don't like that. Do you want to line up a time with me to discuss what's going wrong? And that can all happen automatically. You just have to set it up in workflows. So that's a really great tool that's there, and they're continually adding new functions to it as well. Okay. First thing to do is a lot of people, when they start programming in Qualtrics or programming the survey, they jump into Qualtrics and program it there. Best thing you can do is prepare it all in a Word document, particularly if you're working with collaborators, and have things like programming notes to yourself in there before you start programming, because people get lost in jumping in and programming straight away. The second thing is have screening questions up front. If for a lot of the time, if we're surveying like all the students, we don't need this. But if we're looking for particular people in our survey, ask them questions that determine if they're eligible up front. Like if you only want people from Australia, ask them that, or even use the built-in Qualtrics location tools. If you're only looking for people within a certain age, or you don't want people under 18, ask it, build in some survey logic, but have that at the front so you're not wasting people's time. Wording questions is a whole survey science, and it's really hard to do. It's really easy to have leading questions or anything like that. So here's some examples this was from a survey that Donald Trump sent out. I don't want to get into politics, but it's Donald Trump, so it's fun. Sent out years ago about, trying to get a vibe on what's happening in the communities. And all of this is like, do you agree with our conservative talking points? Very, very leading questions, making it clear what people want to see. So look for questions like this. It's really easy to have leading questions. It's also really easy for us to use jargon or industry speak. We all speak different languages. Researchers speak different languages to professional staff, and I don't even know what language like HR speaks sometimes. We all use different language. So if we're going to use terms that aren't really clear to each other, then we've got to, use plainer language or define those terms. Question wording, consider the responses as well, like yes, no. If you're asking someone if they really like a product or not, and the only options you give them are yes or no, they've got to clear usually a fairly high bar to say yes or no there. Give people a degree to work with, and people tend to prefer that. You'll get much richer data as well. Once you've got your program survey, test. Find someone who owes you a favor. Buy them a glass of wine or a coffee or whatever, and sit them down with a notepad and pen and get them to work through it and write down anything they're not clear on. Don't get your mum to do it, because your mum always loves all your work all the time and thinks you're fantastic and won't tell you anything that's wrong. So find someone who owes you a favor and then do their surveys for them too. Open-ended questions are good. Use them, but not too much. If you're going to do true qual, do true qual. Go and do interviews. But this is still a useful tool to include. If you're thinking about asking a question like, what's your opinion about the current Australian Prime Minister? Instead, you might be better asking it this way. How strongly do you agree or disagree that the Prime Minister is a strong leader, competent, hardworking? Ask those questions instead. Surveys are usually better for that kind of thing. Survey length is important. Shorter is better, as are short presentations, and I'm going to shut up in a sec. Agonize over every question. Do you need it? If you've got questions in there which are nice to haves, consider just how nice to have it is. 10 minutes is usually a good survey length for research. For students who are doing voluntary surveys, far less. Check your data before you analyze it, which I've already talked about. And there's a bunch of tools that we use there. And just to flag some of the tools that are available to you, I talked about things like pipe text. There's other things like email triggers, embedded data. There's a lot of stuff there that's available for you to use. So I think that's it. That's my last slide. Oh, the only other thing is if you're doing really, really sensitive research, like clinically sensitive, REDCap might be a more appropriate platform. While Qualtrics has fantastic security, if it's anything really sensitive, ethics might insist on REDCap, so be aware. I'm done. Thank you very much all for listening. Hopefully this was useful and you got something out of it. Please feel free to reach out with questions about the presentation. If you want help with your surveys, please contact Qualtrics support. If it's something, though, about the CQU license and the way that that's implemented, particularly from a research or teaching perspective, talk to me and I'll take it to the rest of the team. We'll see what we can do.